So one of the challenges, we'll just take pen testing, for example. One of the challenges that we've seen is you do a pen tester does a assessment of a product. They write a report, they send a PDF, and then they walk away. So what ends up happening is, yes, you get that check the box for compliance, but you don't actually ever move the needle in securing the product or the environment or the system that you were testing. So we really strive to not only make the reports readable both from a technical side, the people who have to do the fixes, but also consumable from the people who have to get the buy-in and the support from for other resources.
Hello and welcome to the CyberPathfinders, the go-to podcast for everything you need to know about the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity, compliance, and digital resilience. I'm your host, Salvador Beltrán, and in this podcast, we are diving into the challenges, innovations, and strategies that are shaping the cybersecurity landscape today. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a cybersecurity professional, or just someone curious about how businesses are protecting themselves in the digital age, this show is for you. Welcome back to another week of CyberPathfinders, and today we have Clea Ostendorf with us, right? Who is the co-founder and CEO of Wolfpack Security. But before that, you have an extensive resume in security. You actually were a CISO for Code 42, and you worked as the event director for the ISSA chapter in Minnesota. Welcome, Clea, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. We met for a brief summary to kind of connect earlier, and I think we spent 30, 45 minutes just chatting. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to talk to you. It's super easy to talk to you, which is dangerous because I'm a curious person, and then you know a lot of stuff. So, cybersecurity is a little bit complex of an environment. How do you get to carve out in Wolfpack a distinct value proposition for your company, right?
Yes, great question. So Wolfpack Security, we're an application security consultancy. Our bread and butter is in pen testing and then supporting services around that. Now, a pen testing firm is a dime a dozen. You can stumble and you'll find one. We joke about that. So when we were going to market, it's not like we are doing anything revolutionarily different, but we found, and this is where you carve your little space out, is that some of the big players were dropping the ball on consistency and quality. And the way that they were treating their internal consultants was leading to burnout and ultimately a declining product for their customers. So we not only pride ourselves on the type of people that we hire and the culture that we're building, but the way that we are presenting our findings, the way that we work with the teams that we support, both from a development and security side. And then finally, you call myself, my co-founder, any of our consultants, and we're very responsive and treating everybody like they are the Fortune 100 company. I think goes really far when you're trying to find a vendor who's doing something for you that you need to have done, but why don't you do it with somebody who's going to support you in a more in-depth way? And that's what we strive to do.
Interesting. So when you were talking about you present things in a different way, right? So what exactly does that mean?
Sure. So one of the challenges, we'll just take pen testing, for example. One of the challenges that we've seen is you do a pen tester does a assessment of a product. They write a report, they send a PDF, and then they walk away. So what ends up happening is, yes, you get that check the box for compliance, but you don't actually ever move the needle in securing the product or the environment or the system that you were testing. So we really strive to not only make the reports readable both from a technical side, the people who have to do the fixes, but also consumable from the people who have to get the buy-in and the support from for other resources. And we do that in two ways. One is on the technical side, we offer code snippets and really easy ways to reproduce the findings. In fact, I had a customer shared with me, she's a product manager. She's running actually a security company, and we did a test for her, and she said that the report was so well done and so easy to read and use that she was able to take those findings and put them directly into the next quarter sprints. So to me, that's a win-win, right? Not only are you checking the box that you have a more secure product, but you're actually then moving the needle to close the gaps, and that's what we're striving for.
Interesting. So at the end of the day, you end up reaching this gap between the technical side of this is your vulnerability and the managerial side of this is what I need to do, right? It's not, and I believe that often that's part of the biggest gap that it's not spoken for, or many people tend to not see in cybersecurity. When you're in the technical side, you focus a lot on the technical, and when you're in the managerial side, a lot of people, because also I believe it has to do with the age of the field. Like cybersecurity was not its own thing 20 years ago. It was not until recently that the cybersecurity, emancipated from IT. Now its own thing, and now there's a lot of people that might know IT but might not be so capable of understanding this special jargon that we use in cybersecurity. And so when it comes to management, they go really high level, and then technical go really low level. And so who makes the manager understand what the tech is saying, and who makes the technical team understand what management's looking for, right? That's a really good point. So what inspired you to take the leap from being a security leader? You had a CISO position, you were in a pretty good shape in your previous companies. So what made you make this jump and founding Wolfpack Security?
Well, first I want to clarify, I was field CISO, so I was just the talking head, helping engage with customers, etc. So not to diminish any official CISOs of same caliber, but no, you're right. It was a super fantastic role. I love the company I was with. There was all these positives, but it was still a product. I was helping support a security product. And what I saw was products are great. They do their job. You turn them on and they're going to light up, and they're going to tell you have lots of things to worry about and problems to go and solve and alerts to look into. But products don't always support the people and process needed to actually run those products. So for me, when I had an opportunity with my co-founder JJ to start this company, we were saying we're not going to sell you a product to solve your problems. We're going to help you with the people and the process and actually come in and close gaps for you. And that to me seemed really rewarding, because there is a lot of noise in the product space. And if I was able to even just help a little bit or a small market of customers to make sense of the noise in their products, then I felt like I was moving the needle and contributing.
So you won't even go into some client or customer and start pushing into them all these different security products and widgets. You end up working with them with the infrastructure and the product set that they are working with right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're coming in and again, our core service is pen testing, right? So we'll do a pen test and we'll identify exploitable vulnerabilities, right? These are real problems that you have that you want to fix. And then we work backwards with the teams to think about root cause and the reasoning behind how these vulnerabilities even manifested in the first place. And what we see, I'd say 99% of the time, is that these companies we work with, and we work with everyone from a startup all the way to Fortune 50, large, mature organizations, we're doing these tests and they have all the tools. They have a DAST and a RAST and an IAS and an SCA. They have all these scanning tools, and yet things are slipping through the cracks, and there are things that they shouldn't be slipping through the cracks. And so why is that? And how can we, not the proverbial shift left, but how do we think about where processes are broken or where we need to think about ownership and awareness and collaboration, maybe some security guidelines. Like, what else can we do to help these teams still build fast, still ship lots of code, still be productive, but also have a better security experience? That's what we're trying to do.
Nice. It seems to me that you brought your CISO baggage with you, right? Like you get you guys are focused on pen test, but besides this pen test and these vulnerabilities that we found, we are going to come and walk with you through these mitigation steps, right? That is pretty cool. What are the most common things that you see besides people having the tools and not being able to use them to the biggest extent of their capabilities? What are some of the things that you find that might be a good to check for companies that are already existing? They think that they have all the tools, and before they come and call you, if there's something that you will say 99% sure, before I actually come and check your environment, you're not going to detect this, or you are going to be missing that. What would that be?
Oh, great question. Well, I'll tell you what, it's never a 0 day. It's never something really exciting. It's usually misconfigured headers and exposed passwords, or identity and access is not as locked down as it should be. I mean, almost every single assessment that we do, that's a broad statement. I'll say about 50% of our assessments, we're able to pivot from one account to the other. So, right, you're a legitimate user, you log in, you change a few pieces in the header, and you're able to go into somebody else's account. Now, this is why is this a risk, right? For the obvious reasons, you're seeing someone else's data. But if you think about how many usernames and passwords are publicly available on the web,
right,
or on the dark web, right, you can take that information, assume that you can log in, and now you have access to thousands of other people's information. So, the scale of the problem expands really fast.
Interesting. What do you think about, and I don't know if you have a take on it, but what do you think about open source tools? Because I work with several companies that they were just being established, and some of the products that other companies use, right? Like they can come at a really big price tag really quickly. And so something that I tended to recommend for a long time to some of the people that were asking me is like, why don't you start with some open source tools, something that might be free or close to free, just pay for add-ons or whatnot, and just start building up your security posture from there, right? Like, do you have a take on it?
Yeah, I fully support open source tools. I think you always have to start somewhere, and doing something is better than nothing, right? We all can kind of agree with that. I think with an open source tool, you still have to do the configuration, you still have to think about ownership, you still have to think about the data output that tool is going to provide, but it is helping you get closer to visibility, giving you more visibility, it's giving you more pathways to focus. So fully support that. And I mean, I don't think every organization needs every tool. I think it has to be a risk management conversation about, what are we trying to protect? Do we have regulatory requirements or compliance requirements that we have to think about? Or are we trying to ship this as fast as possible? What's going to help us get there? And sometimes with open source tools, they do their job, but they might not have the latest bells and whistles. And it's a decision, if we invest in those bells and whistles. Like, for example, there's a lot of products right now in the application security space that do code remediation automatically for you.
Yeah.
So there's a finding, they'll automatically fix it for you. They're not free, right? Those are things, right, you have to pay for. Is that new feature worth it enough for us to ship faster and not slow us down that we want to invest in it? So I think that's the conversation that has to be held.
I like it. I like also that you mentioned that not every organization needs every tool, right? You need to understand what your needs are, in order to make the most out of what you're going to get. Otherwise, you might fairly quickly end up with scope creep, and you just get all the new shiny bright lights, and you might not be the most you might not get the most out of them. Instead of getting 20 new tools, maybe get a couple that you really need and make sure you fine-tune them to the point where you understand what you're getting the most out of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wolfpack Security has been around for some time now. It's going to be a full year fairly soon, right?
Yes, we just hit a year a few weeks ago. It's been a great year. I mean, we're not, my team and I are not new to this space, right? We were kind of a spin-off of another small consultancy, but when we started, I mean, we had nothing. We had no customers. We had no documents. We had a few hopes and prayers and design goals,
Yeah.
right? And now, I mean, we're in a completely different space. We are going through our SOC 2 Type 2. We are working with extremely large customers and well-known brands, and we are making an impact and a dent in their security posture, and that's really cool to me. Yeah.
Do you think that finding yourself at this moment where you don't have anything preset, right? Because you're starting something from scratch, is that good or bad? Is it better to have all these different established procedures and all this standard documentation that you usually use, so you can actually ship things faster, like pentest results, and you actually go through these different checklists every time you do a Windows AD, testing, or it is? Do you think that starting from scratch was actually useful for you guys because you were able to redefine how people does things?
Oh, I mean, it would be much easier if we had a framework. And I have to admit, we did have a framework because, again, the team that started Wolfpack had come from a previous consultancy where all of those processes were defined. But, we still had to build the templates, and we still had to build the methodology, right, and build all the content, the website, the logo, all of that had to be built. But we did have frameworks that we knew well enough to kind of redesign them.
Nice. So it's so it was good that you guys were starting from scratch. You were able to cut ties with anything that was not useful from whatever you came from your guys' background. But on the other hand, it was great to take in your backpack whatever you found that in the past was useful, and you were able to apply it again, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. So in this year of existence, you guys have an interesting team. I believe that you have almost 10 employees at the moment.
Actually, we hired 4 more in May, so now we're close to 15. Yeah, we're growing really fast, which is fantastic.
That's great, but that's kind of sometimes scary. And how did you manage, if you can talk about this? How did you manage to secure some funding to launch Wolfpack? Because launching something is not easy, and finding salary, ways to get somebody else a paycheck is even harder, right?
Yes, definitely. And of course, as we're growing, every additional headcount is something we have to think about, right? Because I would never hire somebody and then say, sorry, I have to let you go. I don't have enough work for you. That's on me to either
Absolutely.
find the work or find a way to pay them. So we, again, we're very lucky. We had some angel investors who had sold their company and then wanted to invest in my co-founder and me in building Wolfpack. So we've been really lucky that they kind of gave us our first start. And let me tell you, starting a business is not cheap, right? I mean, you have
Absolutely.
to, let's just think about the technology you have to buy. You have to then you have to tighten your security, so you have to buy more technology. Then you have to talk to lawyers and legal fees. And then, sales, of course you can do it virtually, but it's much more effective in person and conferences, right? So, I mean, I can definitely spend money. So, it's been nice to have people to back it because it pays off, but it can take some time.
And I want to expand on something you said. You mentioned that you found some angel investors that were willing to invest in you and your co-founder. Does that mean that you personally knew those investors and they knew you and they were like, yeah, we trust in what you do and we are fully behind this idea, or it was actually that you guys had this great idea and you pitched it and they were behind the idea? So I guess that the question is, do you guys think that it's more interesting to have these personal relationships with the investors, or that you have to work more on the idea?
I think it depends. In our case, it was the investors knew my co-founder, and then he pulled me in to support the mission. Now, we did not initially settle on application security. We went down a few different paths before we said, okay, because again, a company doesn't start overnight. It's a lot of ideation, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of pitching to different people to get pain points, and then you launch the company. So it was a long journey of nights and weekends to ideate on this. With that being said, I every now and then attend some VC meetups and investor conferences. And more often than not, yes, the product matters, but people are investing in the person or the founders, because
that's really insightful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think you can products change and direction can shift, but if you trust the person that you are investing in, that they have integrity and the grit and the willpower and skill to drive a business, that's, I think, where you're investing more than just in the product.
And I, like with this podcast, actually, I've got to know lots of people that have started their own business in the world of cybersecurity, and it has been really interesting to see that some of them were serial entrepreneurs. So they started something and then they figure out how to grow it, how to make it grow, how to fix the challenges and whatnot, and then it reached the point where they were, okay, we are good now, to the point where I'm happy to let it go. And they just sell it, or they just put somebody else in management, and they jump into the next project. Like they kind of are thrilled and excited about the being in the latest thing, and that's how they operate. It's something similar that when I believe I would compare it to when you hire a C-level position, right, in any company. If you hire a CISO, he might be the most skilled person in the keyboard, but what you're looking for in a CISO, it's not their ability to be in the keyboard all day long, but rather to be able to steer all these other people that are around the keyboard to make sure that your company can fulfill their goals, right?
I think that's my biggest challenge, is I want to be involved in everything, and I have to step out. And in my head, it's the balance of, if I'm not involved in everything, does my team think that I am not working as hard as them? Which is, probably a personal thing I have to work through. But I do think about that. I want to be the first person answering. I want to be involved in every scoping call and every report delivery. But at some point, you have to step out and say, okay, you need to spend some time just thinking and strategizing and directing the ship instead of always steering it personally.
Absolutely, and that's a pretty complicated dilemma to find yourself into, right? What are some of your strategies, or how? When do you decide, okay, this is worth for me to invest the time and take these upon myself, and how do you end up deciding these other tasks, even though it's equally as interesting, might be worth for me to delegate to somebody else?
I think we're still working on that. Kind of again, as a startup, we need to do a better job of defining roles and responsibilities. Like who's
Yeah.
like a racy chart almost of the leadership. So we're getting together next month. That is on the agenda to really define that, including our investors, because they're active in the business. What do we expect of them? Because if
Right.
expectations are not clear, I think that's when problems happen. So if we can come to a conclusion as a team, who's responsible for this point person, who's backup, who do we consult versus where do we just, run with it? I think everybody will feel a little more comfortable in their responsibilities and day to day, and the line will be drawn a bit more.
Absolutely, and you touch in a really important point, I believe, over there, and is that when you're in a founding state, even if you're in a startup and you're like 1 year old or whatnot, you're not a fully formed, structured company yet, and that means that sometimes you have to wear a couple dozen hats a day, right? And so you have to go into your finance officer right now, and then you go back to your CISO position, and then like something happens and you have to jump into the HR mode, and it's like, okay guys, I'm fine, what's going on here and there. That's I guess that had a toll on you. What has been your experience through this first year? I mean, are you enjoying it?
Absolutely love it. Yes to multiple hats. I mean, and some of those hats I don't like to wear, right? Like the compliance stuff, third party risk management, our SOC 2, it doesn't really bring me joy, but it does make me a better operator. So I have to do it. And then, things like this is more like marketing. I love to do it. It's super fun. It's just, talking and getting to know people. But this is not going to necessarily, everything has a different, everything brings value to the business, but you need all of that. You can't just rely on one thing, especially at this stage for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting and fun. So you were able to through these multiple hats find any new hobbies or any something else that interests you?
Oh, you mean what do I do for fun?
Well, no, I mean like through all these different multiple rotations that you're having, through the days and whatnot in Wolfpack, have you find something else that you never thought about that you are actually finding yourself spending a lot of time and being passionate about something that might become your next interest within the company?
I'll tell you, I'm getting a lot better at understanding the logic behind certain risk management questions, right? And
Okay.
how to both answer them honestly and accurately, but also within the risk framework of our business and what we do, which is, I don't think that's an inherent skill. At least it was not for me, but I'm starting to learn that. And that, again, it's not my favorite thing to do, but I love to learn, and that's really sparking my interest in how to make this easier for people. And I think it's a great opportunity for AI to step in. This is
Well,
not a human issue. This should be done by computers.
yeah, and you're actually touching on an interesting point. There's a bunch of new tools, that has been popping up during the past couple of years that they actually help enhance GRC by being able to fill all these different compliance spreadsheets and questionnaires and sending all these different answers about this and that audit, or how adept are you on one or another framework. um, what's your thought on this? Have you tried any of them?
Yes, I've used Security Pal. I think they do a good job of it. And then for our SOC 2 assessment, we are going with Trust Cloud, and it's been really, really easy and straightforward to use. Basically, spoon feeding you each step. So I love
Nice.
that because yes, I'm working with a VCSO to support us in doing this, but I think it's intuitive enough that you don't even need that additional investment if you were really tight on cash.
So you're really seeing the value of AI in there versus, like all these other products that they might be AI marketing, but there might not be as useful. Huh?
Yeah, no, it's been a good experience using those tools.
Nice. So you mentioned that you like a little bit of the marketing and the advertisement portion of it. What strategies did you end up using to land your first customers? Because as a recently born company, you have this service offering, and as you said at the beginning of the call, there are many other people that might be interested or poking the waters on the pentest space, right? So how did you end up landing your first customers?
Well, I think in cybersecurity more so than probably any other vertical or industry, trust is everything, right? So
Yep.
no one, or very rarely do people take a random person's sales message. The only way they're going to even consider your offering is if you are referred to them or if they already know you. And so my co-founder and I have a very deep network. Again, we've been in sales and multiple capacities, for well over a decade. We've supported a lot of people, and we both have the same philosophy of doing right by the person we work with. And I hope that reputation will continue. But our initial customers were definitely in the friends and family space, and then continue to grow. I think there's something really magical when you start a company. People, for some reason, are more open to talking to you, and people are more open to helping you and making introductions. So that's also, just a leg up. I think it's a lot easier for me to get a meeting than it is for, say, a sales rep,
Yeah.
which is not fair, but, I understand the logic behind that. There's only so much time. So it was really friends and family, and now we're, after building our customer base and our kind of brand is expanding and our reputation is expanding, now we're getting some inbound leads, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and you guys are definitely growing, so that's exciting. And something that's interesting that you just said right now, like you didn't want to. It's really hard to sell, so you guys were basically using the network that you already have. And I have a note here from before that you said that you guys were not looking for a product, but you were trying to help the people and processes that were using some of those products. So it seems that you guys really are oriented onto the services part, right? Like, so you want to make sure that you service all your customers and that you are actually providing some added value in there.
Yes.
That's quite a shift compared to other companies, right? Like you want to make money, and money means a pen test. So let's sell as many pen tests as we can. How can you balance that, doing enough pen tests, but then at the other hand, spending enough time in each pen test that you can actually provide the most value to your customer?
Yeah, I think it's a tough balance. I mean, I wouldn't say we overscope, but I think we give ourselves a few days buffer. We also try not to double book or triple book our consultants like many other firms do. In fact, we're hiring people, and we said, why are you even talking to us? We're a small name. What are you interested in? And they said, I'm working on 3 projects right now, and I have to deliver all 3 of those this week. Do you think I'm giving, what is that, 120 hours of my time to these customers? No, they're getting maybe a quarter of what they're paying for. And so,
Right.
I think just in itself, that's where we're shining. We've won a few customers where everyone has done pen tests, but where we're winning is they say, hey, we did a pen test, we'll give you a shot, see how you compare against the other players, and we're finding things that other people never even found. And sometimes customers say, oh yeah, we knew about that, we're surprised no one ever found it, like, good job. So it's yay, we did a good job, but oh, it's not a big deal, we don't want to fix it. So I mean, I just think people have tried to commoditize this market, and we're trying to do the opposite. Add high value, good experience for the customers, but then also support them in the additional services. And then the other thing I would say, you talked about kind of that go to market strategy. I think anyone who's selling anything overcomplicates what they're doing. So I'm solving all these problems and it's really complex. When I get a cold outreach, I just want to know, what do you do and how is it relevant to me? I want it simple. And then if I'm interested, okay, we'll talk about it.
Interesting.
Instead of, making it really verbose and trying to
Yeah.
throw technical jargon at me, just tell me how this helps me.
Yeah, just start with the basics and build up from there. Like you get a new customer and you kind of try to understand what their market is, where they make the money, right? And so what are their critical systems, so you can actually make sure that those are being checked also, right? Do you then kind of try to tie it down to which kind of compliance do they need? Do you tie those different frameworks in the compliance space to your pentest, so you make sure that if they are right now holders of, I don't know, the ISO 27001 certification, that you make sure that every pentest finding that they have, they actually go through and report to management, so they can justify that they can still be compliant with this 27001?
Not really. I mean, I'll put it this way. Customers, or, when we're talking to people, they know what their requirements are.
Yes.
And for, ISO 27001, there's nothing really specific that you have to hit on. You just have to kind of do an assessment or pen test. So I think there's a little wiggle room that it doesn't need to be so strict. Now, I have a customer I'm working with right now for their compliance purposes. They need 4 different report outputs. It's a lot, but that's what they're requesting of us to meet their compliance concerns. So no problem, we can do that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was wondering to which point you guys get integrated with these customers that you guys have, to help them get those compliance. That's pretty cool that you actually can work with them and help them, as long as they know what you're looking for, right? You can help them get that. That's pretty cool. I might touch a little bit of a sensitive topic on the red side, but what's your feeling about these attack simulation tools? There's many different attack simulation tools, like the Red Canary and others, right? Where you can actually create this cyber kill chain and then just launch a simulated attack against certain number of machines. What's your perspective as a professional pentest company of these tools?
I think they're great. But again, it's still a tool. So unless you have the people and the process and everything structured in order to let this tool run, I think it could just potentially be noise or cause more of a headache. I think a more mature organization should have an internal red team who's using tools like this.
Right.
But then you also have to step outside of just tooling and think more creatively, more social engineering, more like a black hat hacker versus just what does the machine do. I think that you have to step out.
Yep.
So I think there's value in it. I wouldn't say that's the only thing you should do, but more power to people who use it.
Yeah, absolutely in agreement. And the why I asked is because I heard from several red teamers just destroy and slay these tools, and I still see the value in them, especially for small medium companies that I don't know what the pen test might cost with you guys, but some of the pen tests go north from $10,000. It depends on the duration, scope, and all these different things, but not everybody has an expendable $10,000 a year. Maybe once every 5 years they can get to accumulate $10,000 that they can spend in a pen test agency, so they can have a professional study done for them, right? And they can have a real gap analysis. But during those other years where they might not be able to afford it, I can see how they could use some tools like these automated or synthetic attacks, so you can actually have a little bit of a understanding of how where your infrastructure is security wise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I also think that you can use the output of those tools to then build a custom manual pen test or red teaming exercise. How far did the tool get, or what can you leverage with that information to continue to expand? So I think it could be used multiple ways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So how would you, just out of curiosity, how would you do that? Do you think that there's value into I tried all these things with the automated tool, and they found findings in this set of systems, and they didn't find anything in this other set of systems. Would you think that's more interesting to go after the things that we already know that there are findings, or to go after the ones that they are not supposed to have any findings?
I mean, both. And then I would say, if you're already in the system, what damage can you do? What data can you dump? What data can you manipulate? Really hit on the impact of a breach, because it's one thing to say, okay, I'm in your system, like you're popped, versus I'm in your system and now I'm exfiltrating data, and your tooling and your MSP or your SOC is not identifying it, or they identified it too late. I mean, that to me is also valuable, and I'm seeing a lot more in the red teaming engagements that we do. People say, I'm both testing, our security defenses, but I'm also testing these vendors that I have employed and seeing their response time and what they let me know. Because you're seeing, is the value there, or do we need to have some conversations on what matters?
I manage several firewall products, and I always felt so great when they had to call me and ask me to whitelist an IP because they were going through a pen test and they were not able to get anywhere, inside the application, and they were, after like 2 or 3 days, it's like, we need to just whitelist this IP, otherwise there's going to be no findings. It just had this great feeling for me. It's like, yep, they weren't able to bypass the WAF, therefore,
Yeah,
that means that I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, I think that's so valid. I also had a customer request, and we were doing this anyway, so it was just sort of nice to be like, oh, I'm on the same page with you. But they said the same situation that you just mentioned, that the firm couldn't bypass the controls, and they had to open it up, and then they still got a scathing pen testing report about all the findings that they found afterwards, when the original organization said, you wouldn't have been able even to get in unless we let you in. So we believe that it's good to highlight things you're doing well first, and then get into risks and what.
Absolutely, but it's really important to never disregard any of these findings, even if you have to disable a couple of different layers. That still means that your application, in the heart of your process, it is vulnerable. And hence, like, if at some point, for whatever reason, God doesn't want it to, but if for whatever reason something goes wrong and your firewall layer 1 fails and your control layer 2 fails, then now you're exposed, right? And if you have been dismissing all these different things forever, well, now it's when it comes up to fruition that patient person that have been knowing about this vulnerability forever. Or the same thing, I believe, might apply to, you were talking before about pivoting from, like just managing inside the headers different tokens, or exploiting different ways of getting from one user to another. The same thing can happen from one system to another. Once you get to a vulnerable system that you didn't know because you had this 0 day, you might not know how to exploit that system. But now you get into the infrastructure, and lo and behold, there's a bunch of Active Directory stuff flowing all around, and there's a bunch of different tokens, and you can just get to play with things. If you get through a system that somebody might just have ignored for a couple of, I don't know, years, because we were supposed to have this component in front of it that makes it super secure.
Right. And what happens if that goes down, right? And it does, because technology is fallible.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I believe that these SLAs of 5 nines, it's pretty cool as a concept. It's pretty cool as a goal. Nevertheless, we have to be ready for when that 0.01% of downtime happens, because sometimes what's your DR plan, right? And I've seen that done in one company where their internet connection, it was not a DDoS attack, it was actually a fault in their internet connection. So the ISP went down. They had to bring up a second ISP where they had the DR plan, so they just had to change ISPs. Well, just so happens that the ISP, their main ISP, which I'm not going to mention, but it was a big company that also offered cybersecurity services, they had connected their entry point to the company with a firewall. Now ISP number 2, that was supposed to be a backup DR never happened situation, had no firewall, had nothing. And so they had to be connected to the internet for more than a week without no firewall or anything. And allegedly nothing happened, just a little bit of a spike in the internal traffic. But, those are things that you will not consider in a regular environment, but if you really dig deeper, it depends on how much understanding do you have of your infrastructure and how much deeper do you want to dig, right? You always can find something if you want to. And what's your advice when it comes to making the infrastructure secure 100%?
It's impossible to make anything secure 100%. But
So,
okay, that's my easy answer. Harder answer, it's still an easy answer, is the basics, right? Strong passwords,
right.
Access control, visibility to, services. I think those things are not exciting, but if you gotta focus on them and you'll be in a better state.
So what would you advise a company when to stop digging, right? Like we were talking about, if you keep digging, there's usually something else that you will always be able to find. When will you tell a company, okay, stop digging right now? You're actually just burning cycles on overthinking things.
You mean from like a pen testing perspective?
Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah, if they reach a point where there's a vulnerability find, but they have to like disable several things, when would you tell them, okay, this pen test came up with only a few results, and you can, just don't worry about them unless you have expendable money?
Sure. I mean, for us, it's time boxed, so it's pretty easy. And then, depending on what you're finding, maybe the impact is higher, but the likelihood is lower. And so it doesn't become a priority. So I think at some point, the impact, the likelihood becomes so low that, it's an informational finding versus an impactful, exploitable finding.
That makes sense. Yeah. So when you put it in context, then you can now look at the findings themselves, right, or the vulnerabilities themselves. You have to put them in context and what does this mean for the company. Yeah, that's a great point. So now we are in the AI era, right? And everything is having AI. What other security trends or application security innovation stuff do you see happening in the next 5 years?
All right, good last question. Let's see. Vibe coding. We got to touch on it if we're going AI and we're entering my world of application security. So Cloudflare put something out that in the next 5 years, more code is going to be written than in the last 20 years combined.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So what to me that means is we are now going to be giving everyone the power to write applications and post them to the web. And to me, the threat landscape is incredible and expanding. With that
Right.
being said, we do also have the ability right now, because it is in its infancy, to design frameworks and security best practices within these coding tools that will set us up for success, right? So that is my hope and aspiration, that we can do that, that we build a secure framework within the vibe coding.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I've seen some initiatives, especially in Europe. I believe they were trying to push some legislation. I don't know if that comes, if that exactly will fulfill the request, or what you were thinking as the framework, right? But they definitely are trying to push some legislation on the use of AI. But I have this feeling that the vibe coding, like it's pretty cool and everybody does things, but is that secure? I mean, who else is looking at that, right? Like there's even companies that are getting rid of programmers because, like, why do we need all of you guys when the, lead analyst or whatever, they can just go in ChatGPT and generate some code, or, a Gemini or DeepSeek or whatever, and they just generate some code themselves, and he can do everybody's job much easier, right? Or that's what they think. Well, how do you see that impacting your industry? I don't think when you generate some vibe coding code, right, some programs, that they don't have the same level of accuracy. Inspection, at least we can, that's an easy one to see because there's no other set of humans but the one that usually generates the code. It's going to be more code, but I believe that can also mean, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be many more insecurities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably a good thing for our business. I think it'll take a while before people put it on their radar as, priority. Probably we'll have some lawsuits from the EU saying data was misused, and then everyone's going to have to check on it. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time that we're entering, and I aspire that Wolfpack can grow with it and not just be outrun by the machines.
Yeah,
I think that's everyone's concern.
do you foresee using vibe coding to actually generate some exploits?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Well, you will have to let us know how this works,
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Thanks, Clea, for being here today. And yeah, thank you for sharing all your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a really fun conversation, and look forward to catching another one another time.